You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Welcome back to the show. I'm now joined by Mark Rodgers of Cypherian Translations, who was a guest speaker at Enterprise Ireland's event earlier this week aimed at assisting businesses compete in international markets through the internet. But before we start with that, Mark, I'd like to discuss how did Irish companies compete in international markets before the internet age?
Yes, Karl, the traditional model was for somebody to fly over to France or to Germany and to visit a trade show, try and pick up as many leads as possible, to come back home and then to follow up on those leads. Or if they had a bit more money, a bit like the multinationals, you'd go to Munich or you'd go to Paris and you'd set up an office and then you'd hire a sales and a marketing person. You might even hire an IT staff. It was all very costly and, quite frankly, quite ineffectual. So a lot of Irish companies managed to crack the German market in terms of getting one or two big clients. But really in terms of the mass market and really making it in Germany or France or even the UK, they found it very difficult. And so what Enterprise Ireland were doing at the seminar this week, where they're trying to show companies how you can use the internet to target these markets, and it's a far more cost-effective way of going international.
From that perspective, what was taught and tested from that seminar itself in relation to how to use the internet in an effective way?
Well, specifically, my own business is a translation business, so I spoke for half an hour on how the successful companies are targeting the French, the German, the Spanish and the Chinese markets, and how by using language you can really start to make some inroads in terms of developing leads and contacts. Because you see, most people, I know it's a little bit idealistic, but most people want sales. I want the sales from France and I want the sales from Germany because that brings in the money. But in business, before you get a sale, you have to have a lead or a contact. So in reality, most businesses, if they're starting to try and sell into France and Germany, should be looking for leads first. And if you concentrate on how to get as many leads as possible, good leads, then you're off to a great start. And don't worry about the sales from the point of view of, if you have 200 leads and they're warm leads, you're going to get one or two sales out of it. But if you're going to a trade show and you're only picking up 5 or 6 leads, it's going to be very hard to convert all those into sales. So that's the new model. Certainly for France and for Germany, get your website up there and make it as French as possible and you'll start to get some leads.
Now, just in relation to research, for companies out there that wouldn't be familiar with going through the process of market research, how would they attract and how would they approach that particular topic?
Well, I think depending on the industry, the government supports are there, and especially coming through at the meeting yesterday from Enterprise Ireland, and I'm sure with the county enterprise boards and Board BIA, they're there to help. One thing for sure is the ministers have those organisations under pressure. They want results. And their doors are open. If you go knocking on the doors of the County Enterprise Board or Enterprise Ireland and say, I think I've got an opportunity here, can you help? You're more likely to get a, yes, I can help, or I actually can't help you, but why don't you try here, here or here? They really are gone out of their way to try and help Irish companies who want to export. And I'm sure you'll find that result no matter where you go, be it Tourism Ireland or Board BIA. So, you know, I think you also maybe have to think a little bit about, well, if I'm targeting France, do I know any French people? I mean, you can get interns over here from the French universities. Any company that's up and running for a few years can apply to a couple of the French universities. You might get a third-year student who would love to come to Ireland, primarily maybe to learn English. But if you have a French person with a business degree sitting in your office for 6 months, how much information do you think you could find out about the French market? You can find out an awful lot. Versus sending an Irish person over there who can't hear the conversations, who can't see the signs, who can't read the materials, you're not going to pick up the same level of information. So it is that combination of, if you don't speak the language yourself, then if it's your cousin or if it's a neighbour who speaks French, try and get as much information on the target market and the consumer. What did they like? What did they don't like? Or if you have a little bit of money, you can go to a research company and they'll happily go and find that information for you.
So let's say the market research is done, and let's say the outcome of that market research is yes, a market opportunity exists, there is a product market fit, and the Irish company can compete, let's say, in the French market. The next step is to set up a website. The steps involved in relation to that, I know some of the speakers in the last seminar that we attended made the point that it's important that you have your domain registered in the particular localised market. So if it's, for instance, in France, that it's a .fr. If it's in Germany, it's a .de. How important is that?
It's critical. although we mightn't actually think about it too much, but Google actually wants to look after its customers. And Google's customers are someone in France, for example, that goes online and searches for something. So Google's objective is to give them the right information and the best information on whatever they've searched. There's so much information out there on the web that Google has to narrow it down. So if they find that a French customer has gone on to google.fr, Google is only going to show those pages that are French, that come from servers or computers that are based in France. So if you've set up a website in Ireland and you've given it to one of the Irish hosting companies, Google identifies that as, that's an Irish website. So even if you've translated your website and it's .ie and you have a French language up there, Google is still going to mark that as, do you know what, that website, it's a bit like accents. If someone has a Donegal accent and they say something and someone has a Kerry accent, you can tell even though the sentences are the same where they come from. Well, if you have a piece of French text on the web, Google will tell that it's coming from Ireland, and so it's not going to show it to your French customers. So what you want to do is try and make your website as French as possible. And the number of ways that came out in a seminar doing that is to make sure that you have a .fr domain, that you can host it in France, which doesn't cost you any more than hosting it in Ireland, and obviously that you have the language there so that the French consumer, once they find your website on Google, they're going to click on it, they're going to be interested, and hopefully they'll go and give an inquiry, or else they'll buy from you.
The next stage is the development of content. How important is it for a company to get that right? And let's say, for instance, how would an Irish company approach developing content that would need to be of a French tone without it even being translated yet?
On the web, the content is king. It's the first thing that people see, it's the first thing that people read about. So unless you're getting rave reviews from your Irish customers on your website, is there much point in trying to translate it into French and going into the French market? You've got to make sure, and there are experts out there, there are companies there that'll come in and they'll sit down with you for a few days and they'll tell you exactly what you need to do, and then you can go away to a proper web designer and get a really good site put together, not only from a visual point of view, but also you have to remember that Google it's like a robot. So it's not interested in the images or the pictures or how pretty it is or how well it looks or how sleek it is. Google is interested in seeing a website that the code is very well structured so that it can find out exactly what your website is about and it'll know exactly how to rank it. So you need to get it done professionally, both from a visual and an image point of view, but also on the back end that Google is going to rank it high, which effectively is going to get you more sales.
So Mark, at this stage we have the website domain registered, we have the site hosted in the localised market, we have contact information on the site that's localised to the specific market that we're looking at, we have the content developed. Our next stage is to look at the design element of the site itself. How important is that?
The design element is critical, especially if you focus on, for example, images, even numbers. The fact that text always expands when you translate into German, so your text on the website is going to get smaller, it mightn't have the same look and feel. What you have to remember is, when we design a website, we design it for our own culture. We design it for our own eyes, based on what we're used to here in Ireland. But as you go further abroad, as you go further geographically abroad, people's view on what we thought was brilliant will change and does change. For example, number 13 is a very unlucky number in China. If you're in a hotel, you won't find a 13th floor. If you have a company and the number 13 comes up, or the number 4, there's a web company in Dublin called Terminal 4. In Japan, 4 means death. You wouldn't want to have the number 4 in your company name.
So Mark, once that's completed, you then have a live site. It's a matter then of getting the site ranked through search engine optimization and using pay-per-click advertising and other methods, which we've covered on the show numerous times in the past. But what I wanted to get across on this particular interview is that if an Irish company, a Wexford-based company, is interested in getting into an international market, it's not as easy as just taking your existing content and translating it into whatever language that you're entering into.
That's correct. Google looks at the language that you've translated into, and it'll give you a certain amount of points for that, if you like, and it'll raise you up the rankings. But because it's a computer and it's a robot, it's going to look for, as I said before, more of those 250 factors. And that's why it's not just about the translation. You have to think, how do I make my website as French as possible? And what you're really behind it all is, what is the appetite for risk for the CEO, or what is the appetite for risk for the company in terms of entering the French market? Do they just want to translate a little bit and be successful? Or are they prepared to say, listen, I'm really good in the home market, I know it inside out, but this is a new market out there, I know nothing about it, and I have got to do everything to make sure that I go out there into the French market and be as French as possible. And that's why the old model worked, where you hired a French person in France. Because if you think about it, the best people to sell to the French are the French themselves. They know exactly how to sell and to market in France. But if you think, if we're here in Wexford, we actually don't know how to sell to the French the way the French do. So you have to try and make your company as French as possible or as German as possible.
Well, Mark, lots of great tips shared. Many thanks for joining me this morning, and continued success with Cypherian Translations.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.